Hello and welcome back to the shed. Today's video is a continuation of the beginning series that I've got going on, and that playlist is down below if you're interested in it. Today I want to introduce the hand plane. Now the hand plane is quite a versatile tool in any woodworking shop. A little bit of history. The hand plane, the oldest one that's been found, goes back to something like 79 AD, making it about 1950 years old. I do know that it was Roman hand planes depicted on some of their silver coins, found as old as about 100 BC. So that's around 2,100 years old, meaning that the hand plane goes back a very, very long way, probably more than 2,000 years old. The hand plane ranges from wooden styles like this one. This one's a very, very long one, as you can see, to shorter wooden ones like this one. Then they advanced into transitional ones like this one here, which has got all the metal parts but a wooden sole. And then finally down into the more modern ones, which are the Stanley Bailey style, completely metal and cast iron soles. And some of the modern ones today are using ductile steel, which is stronger than the cast iron, but you're going to pay a premium for them. So the hand plane, and particularly the bench plane, as I've just shown you, ranges from complete wooden with just the steel blades, single iron and double iron. Single iron means that it just had the blade, whereas double iron means that it had a cap iron on top, whether that is wooden planes or the metal ones. The wooden ones had some single iron planes, whereas all the metal ones have all been double iron. The wood ones eventually advanced to a double iron as well because they seem to perform better. Now, the reason I wanted to talk about the hand plane and introduce it is that it is such a versatile tool, and a lot of people like to collect them. As you can see here, I have a lot of different types of bench planes, in particular ranging from a number 3 that I have right up to my largest, which I think is a number 7. There are smaller ones, the number 1. They're very expensive, so I don't have one. Number 8, again, very expensive and not very common, so I don't have one. So I just wanted you to come in here, and I want to talk through the different parts of the hand plane, and then we'll get on to the different things that it can do and the reason why the hand plane is such an important tool for the hand tool woodworker. So first of all, I thought I'd tackle the wooden hand plane, so we'll just talk about the different parts here. So with these wooden style, and this one happens to be a coffin style smoother, just because of the shape, but all these wooden planes are the same. They either have a single or a double iron. This one's a double iron. They have a wedge that locks in, that's made at the same time to lock the blade in place and hold it where you want it. They have the abutments in here which locks onto the front of the wedge, and we have the seated area with an allowance for the screw on the back, bedded normally at 45 degrees, but that does vary depending on what they're made for. So for hardwoods they tend to have a slightly higher angle than for softwoods. And then of course you've just got the main body, which has those abutments and obviously a place. So the abutments are shaped to the wedge plus the shape of the blade, so they're fitted and they work together. As I said before, the transitional plane has a few more parts and tried to mimic the feel of the wooden sole with the flexibility of the adjustment with lateral adjusters and adjustment knobs of the metal hand planes. So when the first metal planes came in, as I understand, the makers didn't like the metal sole. They liked the wooden sole and the way that felt when using it. So what they did is they made a mishmash and put them both together. Now, they were never particularly popular. They weren't used for very long, and the metal ones did take over. The only differences between this transitional and the metal one is really the sole. All the parts are the same. So what I'm going to do is we'll tackle the metal hand plane and all its parts. So first of all, we have the lever cap, called lever cap because it's got a lever. Puts pressure on this little screw here that's in the frog and cams the pressure down onto the front of this blade to actually help hold it in place and stop it moving. After that, we have the blade, chip breaker. Chip breaker is always on the top. It's sometimes referred to as the cap iron. It helps to break the chip as the timber comes through or the shaving comes through, it helps to curl it and break it. And we obviously have a screw holding those two together. Then we come in here. This little unit here that the blade bed's on is called the frog. Before I move on, I'm just going to quickly remove this frog. Now, there are another style called the bedrock style over the Bailey style, and that has pins that holds the frog in place that you attach from the back. But on the standard Bailey, they just got screws with some washers holding them down onto the body like this one here, and that's where the frog attaches here, and they vary based on the age of the hand plane. Now if we look at the frog, that screw that I told you that we cam off is here, slides up, and as you can see when you push here it cams it and puts the pressure down there, and that's how that works. So we have that little, I call it the frog screw, but it's really the cap iron pressure screw. We have on the correct age ones, and this one here is an older one and doesn't have it, a lateral adjuster. Now that lateral adjuster, when the blade is on here, as you can see, moves the blade side to side so you can get it square in the sole of the plane and allow you to get a square even shaving. Then we have this depth adjuster knob, and that's for making the blade protrude more or pulling it back. Now on that is this little piece here. That piece is called the yoke. So it's called a yoke because it goes over like the head of a cow. That's where the yoke, and I think that's where the name came from. Pivots on a pin here, runs through onto the top of the frog, and this is what allows the blade to be protruded or pulled back. When the blade sits on here correctly, we can see just here that it sticks through into this slot and then allows the blade to move up and down from that point there by turning this knob in the correct direction. So it moves the yoke. Because it's pivoting on that pin, we can move our blade up and down. Some of these frogs have an additional little screw here, and they'll have another little piece that fits onto another screw, which has an adjustment screw in the back of the sole of the plane. Now these didn't come until much later. So some of the frogs had this screw back here and this little piece of metal. Now when turning this, you can advance the frog back and forwards, but this older one that I've got here, this number 3, doesn't have that, and you would have to manually adjust it. But this was added to allow for easier adjustment of the frog forward and back to the mouth to allow a thicker or bigger shaving in what they call the mouth here. So then moving on, we have the prominent tote. The rear handle is called the tote. Front handle is called the knob. They have a rod that runs through, attaches onto the sole on an angle with the little barrel nut on the top holding onto the handle. I'll just quickly take this back tote off so you can see what I'm talking about. Screw like that. And then this rod that runs in, attaches in to this on the back, holds your handle on, and the barrel screw touches, and you can see how there's a little ridge down in here, and if I drop that barrel nut in there, it holds on top of that, putting pressure on the handle and holding it in place. Some of these handles, like this hand plane just here, have another screw here to help hold them down. Some of them don't. Now we'll look at the rest of the sole of the plane. So this is called the sole. Obviously it's the bottom, like the sole of your shoe. These are called the sides or the wings. Wings like a bird, I suppose. And then we have what's considered the mouth here, which is the opening that the blade protrudes out of. They're the different parts of the hand plane. So now I want to just move on and show you the different things that a hand plane can do. So hand planes can have their blade profiled in different ways to allow for heavier removal of material or lesser removal of material. I don't have one. There's one plane called a scrub plane that was a specialist one that was made. It had a big camber blade, and that was designed to remove big hunking amounts of waste on rough timber. Then we move in to what are considered smoothing planes. the number 4, the number 5, the number 3, and probably the number 2 and 1 as well. Sometimes the number 5 is not considered a smoothing plane, but it can be set up to do very smooth work. It's normally referred to as the jack plane, but we'll cover the different types of planes and what they're called and what categories they are in another time. Let me grab a plane that's set up for rough removal, and I'll show you how we can remove that, and then we'll grab a smoother and we'll show you how smooth the shavings can be on that. When it comes to these planes for rough removal, you'll see how this blade has a big camber on it. Now, some of them can be a little more aggressive than this, and this is kind of just called a rough removal. I kind of call it my scrub plane because it's set up to remove heavy material, even though it's not technically a scrub plane. And when it came to the wooden planes, the ones with heavy removal were quite often called a 4-plane because it came before the smoother or the other mid-range planes and then your smoothers. Let's show you exactly what this rough removal plane can do. Generally, your rough removal tools, the blade doesn't need to be anywhere near as sharp because it's just hocking it off. You're not looking for a smooth surface, but if it is sharp, it's going to work a little better. Now, generally, a number 5 is probably not the best for a rough removal tool. The smaller, narrower the blade, the easier it is going to be to push through the wood and remove material. But I converted the one on this number 5, so that's what I'll show you. So you can see we have big, thick, heavy shavings. These are almost 1 millimeter thick. That was on its side. Even if I put it on its face like this, you can see how quickly I removed that material. And this little ridged surface that's on here is now gone in very, very quick succession. So you can see these big heavy cambered blades for removing material are to allow you to get the material off quick. So you want to remove it fast, and you want to get your board from rough to a smooth usable board as quickly as possible, and that's where the heavy removal and the big cambered blade comes in. You can move into smaller ones that have a very fine set blade. Now this number 5 I'm going to be doing a restoration on, so you'll see that soon. And this one is set to a very fine cut. So let's jump back here and I can show you what a fine cut smoothing plane does and the differences between that big heavy cambered blade. You can automatically see that this is just moving little tiny parts to start with because the blade is flat. It's counteracting the camber, or that big curve that this blade had here. So if we look at this blade, which is a little hard to see, but you can see that it's very, very flat. There's no camber to it. You almost can't see it because it's got such a fine setting. Now you can hear the sound that it's making full shavings, but not full width. And we're slowly getting to these shavings here, which is what a nice smoother does. Not sure if you can see that on the camera, but they're almost translucent, they're that thin. They're a fraction of a millimeter thick. And the whole purpose of this is that you get that nice smooth board that you can do your joinery on, that you can put a finish on, and it's going to look beautiful. So the whole purpose of this smoothing plane is so we can then get what's called a reference edge and a reference face. Now what that means is the edge is flat to that face. So we have a 90 degree, and if you've seen some other videos, you'll know what a square is, and it's for checking that it's square. So we can hand plane a face and an edge and check that they're square, and we'll be using something like a nice smoothing plane, and we'll get that nice 90 degree edge like this. So if we look at this board, this edge is square to this particular face. And that means that we can use that for our referencing because we know it's true and square. True and square allows us to get perfect joinery and create boxes and carcasses for furniture. The other thing that we would generally use a fine cut hand plane for is having this end grain square. Whether that's for doing butt joinery or dovetails or any other type of joinery, which we'll talk about later. To get this true square and smooth for us to reference marking and mortise gauges is that we need to get this square. Now that can be done by eye, shooting across the top with a device, which I wouldn't recommend, or there's a little jig called a shooting board. Whether it's one of this style or an older style, more like this where you reference using a bench, these shooting boards allow you to shoot the grain. Now I just want to show you a quick close-up of how these work. We'll introduce this a little bit later, but essentially you have a fence which you hold your piece of wood up against, and then your plane runs on its side and shoots across the end to square it up. And because this is 90 degrees to this, we're always going to get a nice 90 degree on the end of our board. So as you can see, the hand plane is quite a versatile tool, especially when getting your boards ready to work or ready to be worked. They're very versatile in the ranging of cuts that you can do. A lot of these hand planes, because you can put the blade in and out, you can change how thick the shaving is and vary it from quite a rough one using a blade that's very heavily cambered down to a blade that might be very lightly cambered, which I don't like to do, or just a square across blade with the corners just rolled like I like to do. And that just means that you're not going to leave what's called tram tracks, and we'll talk about tram tracks and eliminating tram tracks in another video, so stay tuned for that one. Just to recap, we've got hand planes. They go back a very long way. They're important for making our material good and ready to have reference edges so we can do joinery and make stuff. It also smooths it out so the finish looks nice and smooth in the final product. We have hand planes that range from wood to transitional ones that are metal and wood, to the more modern ones that we have today that are completely metal with wooden handles generally. We use them for a wide variety of tasks, with heavily cambered blades like this one here for heavy removal of stock, and very fine set blades like I've got in here, which would be on any plane that you've set up as a smoothing plane to take very wafer thin shavings that are almost translucent. And anything in between because of the variability of using a lateral adjuster. Even the wooden ones, you can tap the blade out a little bit and you can get any thickness of shaving that you wish. So there you go, folks. That's a nice little introduction to the hand plane. We'll delve a little deeper into hand planes in some later videos, but for now, since this is just for the beginner series, there's the introduction for the hand plane, or specifically the bench plane, and the different things that it can do. And as you can see, there's a very wide variety of things that the hand plane can do, and we've only really scratched the surface of what it can do here. So for any of you more experienced viewers out there, let me know in the comments below what I left out of this quick introduction guide to bench planes in particular. If I missed anything, please leave that in the comments below so any of the viewers that are less experienced can check that out as well. And I encourage you to check out the comments to see if there's anything that others might have included that I didn't. So if you'd like this video and you'd like to see some more introduction videos for the various tools and how they're used, please let me know in the comments below. And if you like this video, please consider liking and subscribing down here. It really does help the channel out. If you want to support me a little bit further, please consider checking me out on Patreon. Links in the description below. And if you'd like some more introductory videos like these ones here, please check out the videos on the screen here right now. Bye for now.